I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked. If you're serious about your career, this show is for you because this is a show all about opening possibilities so that when you're hit with the unexpected, you have options from which to choose. Now, speaking of choices, I'm delighted that you chose to be with us today because we're going to be talking about a truly successful entrepreneur. Our topic today is success through emergence. Now, I want you to imagine a woman who decides to open what turned out to be a successful brick and mortar store in 2021. Yes, in the midst of the pandemic. Now, if you could ask her any question you would, what would it be? Would you be interested in how she developed the courage to do this? Would you be more interested in the spark that drove her to such a risky venture? Take a minute and jot down your questions. And if you're watching live on YouTube or LinkedIn, put your questions in the chat so that we can tackle them at some point during the show. I'm going to give you a minute to write them down, so stay tuned. When I work with women who are serious about their careers, we spend time talking about who they think they are and what they feel their true purpose is. You know, without knowing these, anyone can stumble as they work on building a new business. We also talk about how they plan on distinguishing themselves from other similar businesses. And of course, we always spend time on talking about how they will handle the unexpected and remain resilient in the midst of disruption. The elements I just mentioned, purpose, clear identity, knowing possibilities in advance, yet able to define some when the known doesn't work. These are all part of what it means to be resilient as a person and resilient as a business. Today, I have the pleasure, sincerely so, to invite you to meet an amazing woman. She will talk about every one of the, every one of these elements and even more. She's Stacey Krantz, and I'm going to bring her on screen so you can enjoy her as well. Stacey, welcome to Unlocked.
Hello. Lovely to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you. Well, listen, before we jump into our conversation, I want to just introduce people to you a little bit more formally, shall we say.
Okay.
Stacey Krantz is an award-winning designer and goldsmith. She has cultivated a distinct modern design language. Oh, just wait till you see some of her designs. The language is framed within her unique business model that is both deeply personal and universally appealing. What began as a side business while pursuing graduate work ignited into an intuitive entrepreneurial spirit. Guided by her design skills, technical knowledge, and business-minded intuition, Stacey has spent 25 years slowly shaping In Bloom's structure, keeping her clients and community at the center. Now, while initially selling exclusively to galleries across the United States, Stacey eventually shifted to direct-to-consumer sales. And as her company base and company grew, she began to take on custom requests. And as I said before, in 2021, as the world was still dealing with the shock of COVID-19, Stacey opened her brick and mortar shop. Okay, once again, Stacey, welcome to Unlocked.
Thank you. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Well, listen, I love it in the beginning to have my guests just describe themselves a little bit so that people get to know you're a human being as well as a great entrepreneur.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely a creative person, a creative, as you would say. I love the creative process, and I experience that in every aspect of my life, personal life, my work life, and I feel like it's an honor to have this as the forefront of my life. It's the guiding principle of my life, and so honestly, I feel like I'm a very approachable a person. I think the feedback that I get from people around me is that they feel comfortable to be themselves, and through that, I've been able to cultivate some really beautiful, depthful relationships with my clients, with my team, with fellow artists. So I feel very blessed. I'm a mother of 2 biological children, 1 stepdaughter who are launching, and a wife, and I have 3 sisters and beautiful parents. So I have a lot of different roles that I play. And so.
That was a wonderful opening. Thank you so much. It really says so much to me about the person I met when we met the first time in your shop. And I have to tell you, audience, her shop is amazing. You walk in and immediately know that this is a professional who's running this show. Everything is just spot on. So, so I'm glad to hear. But this is what I'm curious about. How did you know that design work, and particularly with jewelry, how did you know that was your calling?
Well, in the beginning, I would call myself a maker, right? I enjoyed the creative process, and it wasn't so specific. It could be a meal. It could be, my environment, my home. So I would say I was aesthetically oriented, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as I was working towards being a social worker. I was getting my graduate degree. I was going to do that track. I was sure of that. And really, I had, I met a goldsmith while I was working as a social worker in New Mexico at a party. And, literally he had handlebar mustache, and he was an archaeologist, and made jewelry as a hobby himself. And so he would go out to digs. He was a Yale graduate, interesting guy, older gentleman. And, I had already been beading and making jewelry with beads at that point. I was in my late 20s. And I just instantly knew that I loved this form of design. It's so interesting because the things that we wear on our body, as opposed to that we decorate our environment with, ours is so personal, and so it's such a unique form of art. But really, I was quite naive about all of it. Like, I just knew I enjoyed it. And I started to buy tools and practice and learn skills. And I just kept coming back. It was just so enjoyable. And I like to make things. I was really just making things to wear and to gift in the beginning. So.
Oh, I love that story. Well,
Yeah.
I think we should not dawdle anymore. I think we should show the audience some of your designs.
Okay.
So I'm going to bring them up, and I'm going to let you talk about them. maybe just a couple of them, because
Sure.
we're not going to show them all this time.
Okay. So this is a really beautiful example of what we do very often here in the gallery. Behind the image of the ring, you'll see is a pile of gold that the woman brought to us. And in this pile of gold was that beautiful blue stone that belonged to this woman's grandmother who had passed away, very close to her. And she fell in love with this cluster design that we had a model of in the case. And this is a perfect example of how we can customize something for a person's very personal expression and memory to carry forward. This pendant that her grandmother wore is now on her finger in a new form that suits her. And that is, the perfect introduction to what I describe as this stage of my career, a co-creative process with my client, rather than I'm introducing a concept of a design, but it's the exchange between my client and I, where we come up with such a specific thing that is just right for that person. And yes, this is a perfect photo to introduce that.
Oh, good. Well, we're going to come back to how you work with clients, but I want to show people one more. Here's another one.
Okay, so this is an example of a design concept that I use a lot. And I call it, stillness and dynamism would be a great word to describe this idea. And I use it a lot. So the exterior, the big straight bands are the structure, right? And or form and formlessness is another way of describing it. And the interior, you have the branching, the leaves, the scattering that's messy and not perfect, right? Like it's not perfectly in a line. So you have a structure, which is the opening and the frame of the band, and then which is to me an expression of what life is, right? And also for myself as an artist, how I work well. With some discipline, with some structure within, and then, the spontaneity that creates that creative spark that's really indescribable. You don't know where you're going to land with it. And it's rarely in a line, right? So that is another great example of something we experience here a lot in Bloom.
Well, as you're talking, your idea of creating, a structure within which you can be creative.
Yes.
It reminds me of a conversation we had as we were preparing for this, where you talk about a box. I wonder if you'd expand on that just a little bit.
Sure. So I often, too many possibilities or too many options can actually create an experience of overwhelm. So the parameters that can close into what I describe as a box allow for less options within that box. Then you can be even more creative with those fewer, concepts. And I find that happens very often. It's like creativity within boundaries. And I find I work really well with that. And it's one of the first things that if I'm designing something just because I want to design it as a piece I want to offer in the line or a creative piece, or if I'm working with a client, I like to get down to what are those things, like what are those parameters, and then from there it's my springboard off to do whatever I want. Like there you play in there, and I find that it is not as intuitive. Like people were like, "Don't you want to just be able to do?" No, I want to know where I am in space and time, and then from there, I can really dance. Right?
This reminds me of two things.
Yeah.
One is the reality that creativity actually emerges from the structure, from the constraints, so that those constraints are actually active in creating something. Thus, we're calling this show the success from emergence. The other thing it reminds me of is a book I read by Twyla Tharp. You know, Twyla Tharp was a great dancer. It's now a great choreographer. And she talks about the boxes, and she uses boxes too, but she uses real boxes.
Yes.
When she gets an idea, you know, she creates a box and she puts a name on the outside, and then she keeps throwing things into the box, you know, a piece of fabric, a piece of music, you know, an idea, maybe a video of her playing in the studio. And then she says the box calls to her, and she opens it and she calls it the repository of my creative potential.
Oh, I love that.
And that's when she actually choreographs the
I love that. And that, I mean, it's so true. And it's the exact same concept. And it's not something that I recognized early on, but until I saw the pattern happening, now I fully embrace it and be like, okay, where do we need to take our lens? Right.
Fabulous. Fabulous. I can see your clients, your customers, whatever you call them, really feeling comfortable in that kind of a space, because they can get overwhelmed too. If
yes.
Beautiful.
They do, and they can. And it is a great tool to, like, you know, calm down. Okay. You know, to really prioritize, you know, your overarching dream for this project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I want to switch subjects now.
Okay.
I want to talk about the fact that you have obviously overcome the great nemesis of every artist. You have figured out how to market yourself. Tell me how you did that.
Okay, well, that has been a journey. I think I always joke that I'm the second of 4 girls. So, you know, I never, you know, there's 4 of us, so I didn't really need to study marketing. I just had to live in my family. But I think in the beginning, it was definitely more awkward, because as you're developing your sense of yourself, your confidence in your own vision as an artist, it can be very vulnerable. And, you know, you're balancing that because you believe in your idea enough that you're bringing it to life. But then going out and showing it to people and say, hey, you want to buy this, you know, or are you interested in interacting around my art? That's another thing. And it can feel very vulnerable, and take some real getting used to, especially if you're more introverted or there's a spiritual element to your work. It can become confusing. I will say that the time that it became effortless was when I shifted in recent years to working directly with clients, and those interactions became more depthful, and you know, it was in service of that client specific situation. It became so much easier, and it flowed, because now it's an offering of using our artistic design sensibilities in service of a person's needs, right? So it became less about Stacey's ideas and more about the clients, and that merging of these two needs really made the marketing more obvious and flowing, right? Because you know, it was more service oriented.
That's interesting. You basically, what I hear is that you shifted your mindset from thinking about a product to giving service to someone.
That's right.
That's even helpful to me, because I find it. I'm reluctant to push my ideas, and yet I know they're helpful to people. So I'm going to borrow your word. I'm in service. That's great. You know, we talked, by the way, I want to tell the audience, we are in the shop. So if you hear some background noise, it's just an active shop.
Yeah.
We talked a bit about Emergence in terms of your art, but how about Emergence in terms of your company? Now, you didn't start with a brick and mortar. You started just doing it casually for yourself. What was the path for that?
So I did start out really as a hobbyist. And then when I was in graduate school, I attended a a wholesale show. There was a show in Philadelphia that was a trade show to businesses. So it was artisans creating handmade work that were selling through shops and galleries that were also indies, like independent stores that sold American made, artisan made pieces, all sorts of wearables, as well as 2D and art you would display in your home. And that was a decade-long experience. So that really was sort of the beginning, and that was solopreneur. I had young children. I would go to 2 events a year. I would make work for those galleries, develop those relationships with those galleries, and then fulfill orders and then refill orders as the year went on. And it was a great experience. I had to learn how to stand in aisles and aisles and aisles of other artists and sell my goods and build relationships and fulfill, and a lot of really basic good stuff, during that first phase. But it was really by myself. I occasionally had assistants do things, helping me in the shop. And then I shifted to sort of what I call phase 2, which is where I went out to art fairs, and I would do those once a month. So I shifted from wholesaling through galleries. And then when the market crashed in 2009, a lot of galleries closed, and it was a good transition. It was a period of fear for a lot of artists, right? The economy really changed. And, unfortunately, people spending on art, diminishes during those times. They tighten their belt. So a lot of galleries closed, and I felt like it was time for me too. I was missing the interaction with people. That was not just business to business relationships. And my children were aging, so I'm getting older. And so I shifted then to working in, art fairs. And that required a whole other different, way of interacting. And I did have some assistance there. But it wasn't until I opened up here that I developed, a team. We started out with 2 of us, and within 18 months, we're now 6. A big shift. And
that's a big growth cycle.
I'm not going to lie. It was, they say that, expansion that fast it was stressful. But it was a good stress. It was challenging. I felt up for the challenge. And I couldn't be more thrilled with, the beautiful team around me and their skills. And, it's a lot more fun. This is, I like coming to work. I like being in the space. I love the team effort, the collaborative, that we come up with so much better solutions with more, great minds, ideas, perspectives. And that has really elevated my experience of my day-to-day. It's a lot less lonely. It's a lot more fun. And it can be a little distracting. And so I've had to figure out how to remain that quiet time for creativity. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's a real thrilling time.
It's great. And I'm also glad to hear you say that there were real challenges. So what can you share one of those challenges and how you, broke through and said, okay, this is what I'm going to do?
It was really a roll of the dice, Okay, Katie, who had does all of our beautiful photography that you're just sharing, and has worked for me for 7 years and played many roles. And one of her main threads has been marketing and managing our communication with clients and in our following. And it was just she and I when we started. And I attempted to hire a person that was going to help in the goldsmith shop that, ended up not being the right fit. So I had to deal with that while dealing with this influx of all this work. And, so that was really tough in the beginning. And I could see just immediately that I was going to need help. There weren't enough hours in the day, and I didn't want to stretch out fulfillment, too long. Right. But we didn't know what was going to happen. When we signed the lease, Katie and I met and had lunch, and we were like, okay, we're going to go all in, and she's going to work the front, and I'm going to make the jewelry in the back for the beginning. And, and that's not at all what happened in the end, but,
you used a word which I really like. You said that first hire on the bench was not a good fit. I think oftentimes people feel that if they are released, that there's a failure. But it's not a failure. It's really just a matter of not fitting
That's right.
to what the need was. Maybe their skill wasn't in the right place or
Mhm.
something. Yeah.
Right.
And
And
so go ahead.
it's more like an atmosphere, right? Like there was a certain atmosphere and a certain like, I'm a joy is like my favorite. Like I like to be happy. I like to enjoy what I'm experiencing. I like to have a very relaxed atmosphere, and we do definitely have that here. And so I've become more skilled at recognizing that energy.
Mm.
And I've met the different characters of the play that are Team in Bloom now. It was like, okay, this person fits the culture of In Bloom, and which became its own entity.
You
Its own
know,
thing. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, to be able to recognize ahead of time whether they fit the culture.
Yeah.
That's a really hard thing to do as a manager. I mean, I've done this for many, many years.
Mhm.
And when you miss it, you feel bad about it because you didn't see it. You learn, but
Mhm.
you still feel bad about it. But it's a very important thing because it can disrupt a really good working relationship of the team when you have the wrong person.
That's right. And I also think one of the things I learned about that was to allow a trial, to
Yeah.
allow
Yep.
a period of time to get to know each other. And because the way a person appears on paper, I mean, it's like any beginning of relationship, you're going to get their very best in the beginning, right? So, but the truth is, I want to know what they're really like. Like, I want to know what it's going to be like in 6 months or a year. What's going to be that thread of that person's values, and do they align with ours? Can the trust be established and maintained and built, like between us all? And so that's something you don't really know until you get into those situations. The challenges are just that day to day, and that takes a
Mhm.
little time. So I like that idea of maybe trial, a little,
Mhm.
let's feel each other out for a little while, for a few weeks, a month, and
Mhm.
see if we're a good fit for each other. And it also
For
allows
each other.
that
That's right.
person.
Because oftentimes it's the you think you have a great culture, but it's not suitable to the person.
That's
So
right.
they really need to go and find something
Yeah, good
alternative.
place.
You've referred to your shop as In Bloom, and I'm really curious. How did you come up with that name? It's a nice name.
Thank you. I mean, going with the theme of emergence, I if you look at the flower itself and the logo, there's a flower form that is coming out of the other one. It's coming forward and over to the side a little bit. So it's a visual cue of the word, expression of the word emergence to me.
Mm,
So as is In Bloom, as
mhm.
clearly the double entendre. Clearly, I'm inspired by nature. And who doesn't love floral forms? Um, and then the In Bloom itself is the expression of emergence in nature. So all those things, and really, if I had a cooler name. It's like, I don't know, it's like there's just something like Stacey Krantz jewelry, like, and that's how I had a logo with an SK, and it was Stacey Krantz fine jewelry. It just, I feel like as soon as I shifted that, it also opened the door to a group, having a team and
Yeah.
having a collaborative creative experience in here that wasn't just all about Stacey Krantz's ideas. And so that allowed, and I changed my name actually a while before. It was when I shifted from wholesale to retail in like
Mm,
2010 that I started to come out with the In Bloom. And
mhm.
but it really, yeah, it was another 10 years. And then it really has served us, that name, and
Good,
I
good.
love our logo.
Recent, recently, a colleague of mine posted, I guess it was, he wanted to know uh, if what was an event that gave you joy. And I remember putting in there, when I see a flower that has just finished opening up, it's as if it's saying, I made it, I made it, I made it.
Yeah,
And that's what I was thinking of. You were talking about In Blooms. It is a moment of joy. And
it really
now,
is.
Yeah. Now, speaking of which, I think it's time to show a couple more of your
Okay.
beautiful designs.
All
All
right.
right. How
Oh,
about these?
these are really cool. So this lovely person came in, and she is a diplomat and has worked all over the world, and including, I think these came from Africa. One of the nations she served in Africa, the pink topaz rectangular shapes. And she was just such a wonderful client. She brought in some pieces that were her mother's and her grandmother's, and we pulled things apart. But these were from her own travels. And when she really had a bold style, like, and this is part of the thing that happens, like, looking at the person standing in front of you, you're looking at how they dress and how they communicate, and learning about her career, which was really interesting to me, to be in service like that and be assigned to countries you don't know where you're going next, you know. And so we wanted to do something really bold. So our edition, she loved our leafy kind of. She found a few things in the cases she loved, and we wanted to sort of soften the squares, right, with
Mm,
a little bit of leafy design, and adding this pop. These are actually Savarite garnets, and they just have some. They're unexpected to me,
yeah.
that color, and she really liked them. And she had really bright red hair, and she wore really big, bold jewelry. So we were so excited. And I just sketched them up right there and showed her some stones. And she was like, go for it. It's my favorite thing when that happens. There's a certain surrender that happens from the client that
Hmm.
is allowing and trusting me to go for it.
Hmm.
And this is what we came up with. And she absolutely loved them. So
Oh,
they were a real joy to make. That was,
that is a marvelous story.
yeah.
And it reminds me of a piece that I had commissioned an artist to to draw a mural in my office. And we had about 2 hours to talk. And I said, I like these kinds of things. And it has to be these colors because this is the color of the room. And I left for 2 weeks and I said, you have 2 weeks to do it. And I came back and just like you, he intuited what I needed, interpreted those few constraints that I put on him. 2 weeks to do a big mural. Anyway, I came back and it's my favorite mural.
Oh,
It's just
wonderful.
glorious.
Yeah,
So
see,
I
that's
can understand that.
yes, and it's like it's a real gift when that trust comes, and it doesn't always like. And
Yep.
sometimes I have to allow the client to be more like they want to be more in control, and I'm okay to do that.
Yes.
And I may make something that maybe aesthetically wouldn't have been my full choice,
Mhm.
but in the end, they're going to wear this on their body, and it,
Yes.
So I'm willing to like. I may have some lines where I'm like mostly technical, like that
Yeah.
it would
Yeah.
not wear well or not hold up well. But I do love it when a client really just lets me go for it and trusts me, and it feels really good. And even
Great.
sometimes they're risky.
Yes.
Sometimes there's been
Yeah.
risks in that, and it's worked out,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But
Yeah. You're right though. It always feels good. I know when my clients we talk about what they want to accomplish, and then they say, "Okay, Madelyn, this is what we want to accomplish. We trust you to do it." So, yep, I know that one. Okay, here's another one.
oh yeah, it's one of my favorite rings right here.
It is awesome.
I do love this photograph too. Katie is such a talented natural photographer. Um, so this ring is from I call the Sage collection. So it is, leaves wrapping around really organically, naturally around the finger, holding up this one gem. And it's definitely like, I'm always so curious what clients are drawn to this idea. I have made this design multiple times now, and every time it looks completely different because we've done different shapes, configurations. We've clustered little stones in between. But this is one of my favorite rings because it is. I designed it initially for an architect. This woman had gotten divorced, and they agreed that she was to keep the ring. She had a very big stone, and she wanted something really different. And this design was started out as an earring.
Hmm.
And what happens to me sometimes when I'm in the groove on my bench is something will be on my bench and I'll see it sort of out of the corner of my eye, but it catches me from an angle that's different. And I can remember grabbing that and then bringing it to my bench. It was an earring, and putting it on my ring mandrel. And I was like, that's it. So then I took the other side, and then there I went. And this design emerged from that. And, this is down the road a few times, and it's shifted a little bit from that first one. But perfect example of it's really quite a miracle, actually, when these things happen. And, and it's surrender on my part, as an artist, to allow the kind of these periphery areas to catch something that's fresh. You don't know what's going to come, you can't force it,
Nope.
And so this is one of my favorite rings.
It reminds me of teams. You always want to have somebody who sees the world very differently on your team. Maybe they're very quiet all the time, but then they come up with the right idea. Or in fact, I've said this before on the show, when I have the luxury, I bring an artist on the team because artists see the world so differently. Mm-hmm. And it jolts the whole team in a very positive way to be much more creative.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
There's no robot that will ever do that.
I think you're right.
Let's hope so.
Or at least hope so. That's right. Well, I want to shift and ask you a very different kind of question. You've been at this for 25 years. The last 2 years, approximately, you've been at a very different place. What have you learned from this?
I think the word I would use is trust. To trust in my own intuitive impulses in decision making, but also that others giving trust and receiving trust was something I was afraid of. It was probably my biggest barrier in moving downtown and opening up a store that had to operate on this level of professionalism and consistency. I was afraid that I couldn't find people that would love it as much as I do, or would know how important these values are that we hold at In Bloom, and could understand, And it turns out those fears were really unfounded. And that's been really healing for me as a human and as an artist and as a business person. And, not on purpose, but all of my team are women. And, to be in a group of, talented, smart, pure-hearted, hardworking, dedicated, women that collaborate and treat each other respectfully, has been very healing for me. Very, very healing. I, as an artist, can feel a little isolated, and people with ADHD, which is something that everyone around me would say is very true. That we have the challenges that we have, and there can be a lot of experiences, pain in traditional schooling and linear paths of the way society wants us to, walked into the world. And, and I was doing that. I was going to be a social worker and get my job and and none of those things happened. And there were concerns, and, there can be an outsidership that happens. And, I know that's not true on a very important level, but being and operating on a daily basis in here for 18 months with this team and with our clients, I feel so much faith in the goodness and what's possible when you have an environment and a workspace that's very healthy and oriented towards love and creativity. And man, we got this here.
That's great.
So it's been really special time.
Okay. Well, I think we need to show them a couple of more pieces.
Okay, let's do it. Oh, these are cool. These are big. These are like these. They hang about like this long. And this again is another example of structure, right? Frame and play in frame, right?
Yeah.
Form and formlessness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, a theme of mine as an artist. I like to ascend. I like to always have a trail and ascend. And you see that with the diamonds, starting. All 3 diamonds are different sizes, slightly so, right? And they're a path. You can see the pathway, and that's another thing I do a lot. So this is my go-to favorite thing to do aesthetically. I love the shape, this organic open leaf shape, and then the story within it. So,
You know, one of the things I love about this piece is that they are not identical.
right.
And it's, but they go together. They are a pair. You see it immediately.
They're mirrors. Yeah,
Yeah.
they are the opposite way. The trail of the diamonds is a book match,
Yeah.
as is the leaves, and each leaf was cut out individually, so they're each individual.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, when I made these, I have a really fancy tool in the back. It's a laser welder, and really a wonderful new tool that's new to me since I opened, that allowed me to build those in a different way than I have in the past. So when I built these, the actual stem of the leaves is actually behind the leaves, and they're all kind of like it was just the way I made them was structurally different than before. And I just loved, again, an example of how something can emerge in the moment. And then you're like, oh, I love this. I'm going to do this next time. So I love these. I love this picture too. Again, another Katie photo.
It is.
Yeah.
It is a fun one. All right. One more.
Okay. Oh, yes. So this is early on in my career, I developed a line called Branch, and I would go out and find branches and little budding, like in the spring, little branches had little buds just starting. And I would do what is a direct casting, where you take the object and, suspend it in an investment casting and burn out the object, and then pour molten metal in. So then you have the exact form of that object in nature, now in metal, right? Then I would take, you can see the branches in there, and then I would take those objects and form them into pieces that could be worn. So this is a ring shape, and that structure of the branches allows for, again, this is a family ring, multiple generations of diamonds put together into one ring. And that allowed for this beautiful, this is not a ring you see people wearing every day. And we've made this ring with this branch so many times, it never ever looks the same twice, because of the configuration, the color metals, the color stones. And one of my favorite, this is a classic in bloom. This has been in the line for 20 years. Yeah.
I love the fact that it represents stones from many different generations.
Yes.
Because many families, that's what happens. This is so-and-so's engagement ring, grandmother's engagement ring, etc. And how do you use them effectively? And this is so glorious.
People really love that. It's one of our favorite things to do.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
One more.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this couple. I love that. I wasn't really aware what pictures this is making it so fun for me. This lovely couple are scientists at Fort Detrick here in Frederick. And they were really drawn. She said to me, first thing she said to me when she came in was, I love ginkgos because they're the relics. They're the dinosaurs of the plant world. She's, coming from a science perspective. And the band above it was carved in by hand. The diamonds came from her grandmother's ring. She was a no fuss, no fancy glam kind of person. So she wanted simple, but she wanted very much to use every one. So we came up with this idea of having her wedding band have the side diamonds, the center. I took the princess cut and put it on a kite position, meaning like this rather than straight, which is something I love to do with squares. And I really love that there's a tenderness of these two leaves together, which I think is lovely to represent relationship. And then the ring below it, as you can see, are textures as if ginkgo leaves are laying on top of each other. And that was completely spontaneous, new for this client. I have a similar kind of look where they're like just these little tips of the leaves, and it's in a male ring. And after our conversation, I was like, I just in our conversation, this idea came to me, and I was like, let me try this. And so I carved one into silver. I actually carved both the rings in silver first and had them in to see, and then I carved them in the real gold. And so this was a completely handmade piece, and really just a lovely couple and experience for me as well. I think they really enjoyed it. And just, this is like such a joy to be able to do. They'll wear these on their fingers.
It's great.
For their lives together. And it's what an honor.
What an honor. I agree.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's been wonderful seeing your designs as well as hearing about this wonderful experience of your business. I'm just thinking, I'm looking at the time. Yeah, I want to make sure we have time for this. And by the way, I don't know whether there's a technical issue with my platform, but I'm not seeing any questions coming in.
Okay.
And it may be the technical difficulty, which I will clarify after the show. I can't do it now. So I apologize to anybody who has posted a question there if I haven't mentioned it to you. All right. I think that at this point, I would really like to think about what lessons you would say to somebody who's trying to make a decision as to whether they go in business. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily a brick and mortar shop, but making that step. What are some thoughts that you have that you would convey to them?
Well, I think the first question I would pose to anyone that was thinking about going into business would be a very simple one. And that is, does their business concept actually solve a problem? And does that actually, is it something that people would pay money to have, in their lives, if it's an object or a service? Because without that, it's really tough. I mean, you can pour all the marketing you want to into it, but if it doesn't actually solve a problem, and you could even say for art, that problem may be, I have a hole in my on my wallscape that, and I want to represent my travels to wherever, and you're an artist on the, it's really solving something though. It's really filling something. And I think sometimes people may fall in love with their idea, and that idea might not be marketable, actually something that people would, and I think that's an important first question. It's a hard question.
Mm-hmm.
Get really excited and attached to something. But unless we've really tested that out. And for me, that was going to Eastern Market with my little table back and forth every weekend for 3 years, testing out, can I do this? Can I make things that people like? That's what those 3 years were. And they were super important. And it was very inexpensive and not very risky, because I'm actually kind of risk averse, but people might not. But unless you have a way to do that initially and test it out, and actually have that interaction with others and can communicate about it and are willing to listen and get feedback, I think that you can get really attached to an idea. And so if there's a loose grip, and you're willing to adapt, which I saw myself doing all the time. You know, I would look at what people were wearing. I would look at what, oh, so that sold and that didn't. Sometimes I like pour my whole soul into something, and there it will sit and sit and sit. And then the other thing that took me like, you know, was like, there it is like the bestseller. You know, so you have to have a light touch. You can't be too attached. And that's where the surrender comes in. And I do see that as a beginner's struggle.
Yep. I think you really have touched on a very important point, that you have to know your audience, your customer, what are their needs in particular. Yeah. Can you speak to them? Wow. I am so inspired by you and your insights and your actions. You know, the idea that the customer's desires are the constraints in the box. I would just love that. And that actually allow your creativity to emerge. And when we feel disruptions, they stop you in your tracks. You have to remember to see the constraints as part of the creation of solutions and the next step and the way out and up.
That's right.
So I want to thank you, Stacey, for giving us such a clear and inspiring example.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. You've been real
good. Go good. Well, listen, I want to give you a couple of minutes to tell people where you are, how to get in touch with you, and maybe some final words.
Sure. So we're in downtown Frederick, in Frederick, Maryland, in historic downtown on Patrick Street, 100 East Patrick. We are open Tuesday through Saturday, generally 10 to 5, open a little later Thursdays till 6. Our website is inbloomjewelry.com. And generally speaking, anybody's welcome to walk in at any time. Walk-ins always welcome. People that want to come with a specific project and they want to bring their old jewelry in for us to assess, appointments are preferred, and that you get our full attention and we're ready for you. But really our website is beautifully done, and there's so much information there on what we do. You'll know instantly if you go on our website whether we're a match, right? You'll be drawn to it or not. And that's, by the time people reach us, we know that they like and enjoy what we have to offer, and we feel really confident that we can give them a really beautiful experience.
Fabulous. Anything more?
I just, it's funny, these kinds of things really give you an opportunity to reflect, because you're just in operating, we're operating, we're making. And, it's been a real experience to go back and reflect and see, like, oh, wow, that happened. And then that happened. And then, and I just would encourage people to, I think particularly artists, women, really have a special set of attunements that are needed today. And I do think that going out and starting a business can be a real risk and be really scary. But if you feel the impulse, I would just encourage people to surrender to the process and trust their instinct, and really be willing to feel that feedback and shift your direction as it guides you, and to walk the path, because we need innovation, we need problem solvers, we need connectors, and we need healers. So we need the artists, and our planet needs you. So
great. Well, Stacey, thank you so much for those final words.
Okay.
Wow. Building a business is never easy. It needs to remain resilient so that you can survive as it pushes all the edges of possibilities. I mean, it really does. Building on a strong knowledge base is clearly one reason or one lesson that provides resilience to a business. Remember, Stacey was doing this for 25 years before she opened up her shop. So when you have that deep knowledge base, when one avenue shifts, you have the knowledge to find another path. You want to be building your competencies through constant learning. Focus on the client, just as Stacey calls it the box, the set of constraints that actually stimulate the creativity needed to design specifically for your customer. So building on service to your customers may seem like a kind of ho-hum, except that those same customers are the ones that will support you during a challenge. Check that you are also supporting your network of colleagues so they will support you too. And remaining true to who you are, knowing yourself and your purpose is a clear driver, whether you're driving a business or driving your career. Take the time to explore what your purpose is and make it your guide. When you have to make tough decisions, that deeper self is the one that is energizing you as you move forward. Each one of these is part of building your resilience as individuals and as businesses. Well, I hope you enjoyed our episode of Unlocked today and that you've learned something new and can do differently. And if you have, posted in social media, and if you're on YouTube and LinkedIn, put it there and click the like button and maybe even subscribe. As always, send me your ideas of what you'd like to hear more about. I really will respond to any ideas that I get. Just send them to Madelyn at madelynblair.com. And please check out my book, Unlocked, on Amazon for practices that actually work. I want to thank you for joining us on this segment of Unlocked. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilience.